In this episode of the online classroom, we'll look at the customer requirements for my system's approach to a straightforward problem, keeping a lawn neat. The two key ideas we'll be covering are figuring out what your customer means and translating the customer requirements into design requirements. Now here is a list of likely customer wants. Perhaps you've got these by conducting a survey or through interviews with your client. The wants might be that it's durable, cheap, cuts grass, easy to use, low maintenance, looks good, it's reliable, it's got good spare part availability, long lasting, perhaps recyclable, easy to adjust, and low noise. Let's look at one of these requirements and try and figure out what it means. For example, cheap could mean a variety of things. So what does cheap exactly mean? Perhaps it's low cost, low capital cost, cheap and nasty, affordable parts, low maintenance cost, low time cost, as in it doesn't take long, not expensive. How much is cheap anyway? Does it mean good resale value? Perhaps the two most important parts might be a low capital or upfront cost and a low maintenance or ongoing cost. Note that all of these questions have arisen because we're not quite sure what cheap means. For the example of translating customer wants into design requirements, we'll pick 4 of the customer wants. That it cuts grass, that it's reliable, that it's easy to adjust, and that it's got low noise. Note that you might translate these design requirements slightly differently, and it's worth checking with your customer that you've translated them correctly. So the first one, cuts grass. I've created 3 design requirements for that one, and notice that I've got an ID column that clearly states which design requirement we're talking about. This is really important for when you go on further into your project and you start tracking the design requirements. So cuts grass, when translated to a design requirement, could mean effective cutting mechanism, that it catches grass appropriately, and that it's safe for the user and for passers-by. When the customer says that it needs to be reliable, I've interpreted that as minimize effort required to start whatever the machine might be, and that we want to minimize moving parts because that's going to build in some reliability. The third customer requirement, easy to adjust. So again, 3 requirements here. First one, that common adjustments need to be made by hand. So that might be adjusting the handle or perhaps some of the driving mechanisms. Second is that adjustment time is fast. So that's part of easy. It needs to be fast as well. And the other part of easy is that it's safe. We don't want to be putting our customer into danger when they're adjusting something. The last customer requirement is that it's low noise. So we want to minimize the noise levels in operation. This is a personal one for me because I hate the sound of a noisy lawnmower on the weekend when you're trying to perhaps get some sleep. So ideally it would be a very minimal noise when in operation. So there we have our 4 customer requirements that we've chosen, translated into 9 design requirements. So notice how the design requirements start to mount up when you're trying to be very specific about what that customer is actually asking for. And also remember that the design requirements must have some sort of measurement and some form of benchmark, but we'll cover this when we get to the technical performance measures. Once you have determined the design requirements, it's a good idea to check that you've understood the customer's requirements and that you haven't missed out or added some unwanted design requirements. So just as a wrap up of the key ideas, it's important to understand what the customer means when you're trying to determine what your requirements are. And finally, a customer requirement may have multiple design requirements, and perhaps even more than we've covered today. Thanks for listening to the online classroom for customer requirements. Be sure to do the reading, which is available on the course website, and the self-tests, which are available on Moodle.